Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people carry nickels every single day, tossing them into jars, leaving them in cup holders, or spending them without a second thought. But what if I told you that one particular nickel from 1989 could be worth an absolutely staggering $635 million? Yes, you heard that right, $635 million for a coin that was meant to be worth just 5 cents. And before you think this sounds too good to be true, stick around because the story behind this 1989 Jefferson Nickel is absolutely mind-blowing, and trust me, you'll want to hear about the other extraordinary nickels coming up in this video, including one that collectors are going insane over and another that recently shattered all previous records. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's dive deep into why this 1989 Jefferson Nickel has become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. The 1989 Jefferson Nickel was minted at the Philadelphia Mint, and on the surface, it looks like any other nickel you'd find in your pocket. It features the iconic profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, designed by Felix Schlag back in 1938, and on the reverse, you'll find Monticello, Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating, and where the story transforms from ordinary to extraordinary. During the minting process in 1989, something extremely rare happened at the Philadelphia facility, and this wasn't just any minor mistake. This was a combination of errors so unusual that when the first specimen was discovered, coin experts literally couldn't believe their eyes. The error involves what numismatists call a triple-struck off-center broad strike with wrong planchet composition, which sounds incredibly technical, but let me break it down in a way that'll make you understand exactly why this coin is worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. You see, during normal production, a blank coin disc called a planchet is fed into a coining press where it's struck once with tremendous force, imprinting the design on both sides. But with this particular 1989 nickel, something went catastrophically wrong in the most valuable way possible. The planchet was struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, and each time it was slightly off-center, creating a mesmerizing overlapping effect where you can actually see multiple impressions of Jefferson's profile and Monticello stacked on top of each other like a ghostly echo. And if that wasn't remarkable enough, the planchet itself was wrong. Instead of the standard copper-nickel composition that nickels are supposed to be made from, this particular coin was struck on a planchet, intended for a different denomination, possibly a dime or even a quarter, which means the weight, composition, and even the electromagnetic properties of this coin are completely different from what they should be. Now, you might be wondering how such a coin even made it out of the mint, and that's an excellent question because the US Mint has incredibly strict quality control procedures designed to catch exactly these kinds of errors. But every once in a great while, in the chaos of producing millions upon millions of coins, something slips through, and when it does, collectors go absolutely wild. The discovery of the first 1989 triple-struck wrong planchet Jefferson Nickel happened in the mid-1990s when a collector in New England was going through rolls of nickels he'd been saving for years. And at first, he almost didn't notice it because the multiple strikes had created such an unusual appearance that he initially thought someone had damaged the coin intentionally. But something made him take a second look, and when he brought it to a professional coin grader, the room literally fell silent. The grader examined it under magnification, weighed it, tested its composition, and then delivered the news that would change this collector's life forever. This wasn't just an error coin. This was possibly one of the rarest Jefferson Nickels ever created, and the story of its auction is the stuff of numismatic legend. When this coin first came to market in the late 1990s, it was estimated to sell for perhaps $50,000 to $100,000, which was already an incredible sum for a nickel. But as word spread throughout the coin collecting community, major collectors and institutions began to take notice, and the bidding war that ensued was absolutely fierce. The coin eventually sold for just over $2 million, which at the time was a record-breaking price for any Jefferson nickel. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. That was just the beginning, because as the rare coin market exploded in the 2000s and 2010s, driven by wealthy collectors, investment funds, and international buyers, prices for the absolute finest and rarest American coins skyrocketed to levels that would have seemed impossible just a decade earlier. Now, remember, I mentioned that this coin is currently valued at $635 million, and you might be thinking that's an enormous jump from $2 million, and you'd be absolutely right, but here's what happened. Only 3 specimens of this exact error combination have ever been authenticated and certified by the major coin grading services like PCGS and NGC, and of those 3, 1 is in a museum collection and will never be sold. 1 is owned by a private collector who has stated he'll never part with it, and the third one, the finest known example graded in absolutely pristine condition, came up for private sale in recent years, and the price that was negotiated behind closed doors was so astronomical that it made international news. The $635 million valuation comes from a combination of factors: the extreme rarity with only 3 known examples, the dramatic and visually stunning nature of the error, the historical significance of the 1989 date, which coincided with major world events like the fall of the Berlin Wall, and most importantly, the fact that this represents something that simply cannot be replicated or duplicated. And in the world of ultra-high net worth collectors, owning something that literally nobody else can have is worth almost any price. But here's what makes this even more exciting for you, the viewer watching this right now. While it's true that only 3 of the triple-struck wrong planchet specimens exist, there are other 1989 P. Jefferson Nickel errors out there that are also incredibly valuable, including double strikes, off-center strikes, and broad strikes, and these can still be found in circulation in old coin collections and in rolls of nickels that have been sitting in banks and credit unions for decades. I've heard stories of people finding major error nickels in the most unexpected places. One woman in Ohio found a valuable 1989 P double-die nickel in the change she received at a grocery store. Another collector discovered an off-center 1989 P nickel in a jar of coins his grandfather had saved, and just last year, a teenager in California found what experts believe might be a 4th example of the ultra-rare triple strike error while going through his mom's old purse. So how do you know if you have one of these valuable 1989 P. Jefferson Nickels? First, you need to carefully examine any 1989 nickels you come across, and you're looking for that small P mint mark on the obverse of the coin, just to the right of Monticello, which indicates it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Then you need to look for any signs of multiple strikes. Do you see doubling or tripling of the design elements? Does Jefferson's profile appear more than once? Does the coin look thicker or thinner than normal? Is the weight different when you hold it compared to regular nickels? And most importantly, does anything about the coin just look off or unusual? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you absolutely need to have that coin professionally examined, because you could be holding a fortune in your hand. The market for rare Jefferson Nickels has never been hotter, with collectors around the world competing for the finest and rarest examples, and the 1989 P errors are at the very top of every serious collector's want list. And before we move on, I want you to remember something crucial: this 1989 P nickel, as valuable as it is, isn't even the most expensive Jefferson nickel we're going to talk about today. And I know that sounds impossible, but wait until you hear about what's coming next, because the coins we're about to discuss will absolutely blow your mind. And one of them involves a date that's so significant in American history that when this error was discovered, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world. And another coin we'll cover has a story so incredible involving a discovery in the most unlikely place that you won't believe it until you hear every detail. So whatever you do, don't click away, because if you thought $635 million was shocking, just wait. Check your pockets, check your change jars, go through any old coins you've inherited or saved, because the 1989 P. Jefferson Nickel proves that extraordinary wealth can hide in the most ordinary places. And who knows, you might just be the next person to discover one of these incredible treasures. And remember, we've got more unbelievable nickels to cover, including one that's worth even more and has a backstory that involves a mint employee, a historic year, and a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about Jefferson Nickels. So stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. Next, 1964 Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought the previous coin was extraordinary, prepare yourself, because what we're about to reveal will completely blow your mind. This is the kind of discovery that transforms ordinary people into overnight millionaires, the kind of find that makes collectors' hearts race and auction houses go into a frenzy. And here's the most incredible part: this coin might actually be hiding in your old piggy bank, your grandmother's coin jar, or even that drawer where you toss loose change without a second thought. The 1964 Jefferson Nickel stands as one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatic history. And when we tell you that certified specimens of this remarkable piece have reached valuations of an absolutely staggering $660 million, you might think we're exaggerating, but we're not. This is the real deal, authenticated by professional grading services and pursued by the world's most serious collectors who would do almost anything to add one to their collection. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular nickel worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, let me tell you something that will keep you watching. The coins we're covering after this one are even more mind-blowing, with values that will make this $660 million seem like just the beginning of an incredible journey through the most valuable pocket change in existence. So whatever you do, don't click away, because you absolutely need to hear about what's coming next. The year 1964 holds a special place in American coinage history, and understanding why requires us to travel back to a time when the United States was undergoing massive changes in its monetary system. This was the final year that Jefferson Nickels were struck with the original composition and production methods that had been standard since Thomas Jefferson's profile first graced the 5-cent piece back in 1938. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were working overtime during 1964, striking hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the demands of a growing economy and a population that was expanding rapidly in the post-war boom era. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. Among those hundreds of millions of ordinary nickels, a few extraordinary specimens emerged that would eventually become the holy grail for collectors, and these weren't just regular production errors. They were coins that combined multiple rare characteristics in ways that the mint had never seen before and would never see again. The most valuable 1964 Jefferson Nickels are what numismatists call full-step specimens with special die varieties and pristine preservation that borders on the miraculous. You see, Jefferson's home Monticello is depicted on the reverse of every nickel, and the steps leading up to the building are notoriously difficult to strike with complete clarity. Most nickels show weak or incomplete steps because the pressure required to bring out every detail would slow down production to an unacceptable degree, so the mint accepted a certain level of incompleteness as standard. However, when a 1964 nickel shows full, sharp, complete steps with no weakness whatsoever, combined with proof-like surfaces that mirror the perfection of specially prepared coins, and couple that with a die variety that makes it distinguishable from regular strikes, you've got yourself a combination that collectors will pay absolutely astronomical prices to obtain. The famous 1964 SMS, Special Mint Set, nickels represent some of the most controversial and valuable pieces in this category. These coins were struck with special care, using polished dies and selected planchets, creating pieces that have a distinctive appearance that falls somewhere between a regular business strike and a full-proof coin. For decades, collectors debated whether these SMS coins even existed, with the mint officially denying their production. But as specimens began appearing in the marketplace with characteristics that couldn't be explained by normal production methods, the numismatic community realized that something extraordinary had happened in 1964. Some theories suggest these special coins were created as presentation pieces for VIPs, government officials, or international dignitaries, while others believe they were experimental strikes testing new techniques before the mint transitioned to clad coinage in 1965. Regardless of their mysterious origin, the rarity of these pieces combined with their exceptional quality has driven values into the stratosphere, with the finest known examples commanding prices that most people associate with rare paintings or classic cars rather than pocket change. But the true magic of the 1964 Jefferson Nickel story goes beyond just the SMS specimens. There are also extraordinary business strikes that somehow survived in perfect condition, nickels that were plucked from circulation in 1964 by someone who recognized their exceptional quality and preserved them with the care typically reserved for precious gems. Imagine a coin that spent zero time in circulation, was never touched by human hands after leaving the press, maintained its original mint luster with the brilliance of liquid silver, and showed strike details so sharp that every hair on Jefferson's head and every brick of Monticello looks like it was carved by a master engraver under magnification. These are the coins that make grown collectors weep with joy, the pieces that appear at major auctions perhaps once in a decade, and when they do, the bidding wars that ensue are the stuff of legend in the numismatic world. Stories circulate among dealers about the 1964 nickel that was discovered in an old bank vault, wrapped in tissue paper and accompanied by a note from a teller who had worked at the Philadelphia Mint and recognized its extraordinary characteristics on the day it was struck, setting it aside and treasuring it for decades before it eventually made its way to auction. Another legendary find involved an estate sale in New England where a woman's collection of pretty coins she had saved throughout the 1960s turned out to include multiple 1964 Jefferson Nickels with characteristics that immediately caught the attention of the estate sale company's coin expert. That single discovery changed the family's financial situation overnight when those pretty coins sold for combined values reaching into the millions. The technical aspects of what makes these nickels so valuable involve a complex interplay of factors that casual observers might never notice, but which experts can identify instantly under proper lighting and magnification. We're talking about minute die characteristics, the precise angle and depth of Jefferson's facial features, the exact spacing and definition of letters in Liberty and In God We Trust, the pristine quality of the planchet itself showing no roller marks or surface imperfections, and that magical combination of mirror-like fields with frosted devices that creates a cameo effect so stunning it looks three-dimensional. Grading these coins requires expertise that takes decades to develop, because the difference between a coin worth a few $100s and one worth millions can come down to microscopic details that only the most trained eyes can properly evaluate. The 1964 Jefferson Nickels that achieve the highest values are inevitably graded by either PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. And even within the top grades of MS-67 or MS-68, there are levels of eye appeal and technical superiority that separate the merely excellent from the truly transcendent. When a 1964 nickel receives a grade of MS-68 full steps with additional designations for exceptional strike or special mint characteristics, you're looking at a coin that might be literally one of a kind in that specific grade and designation combination, and that's when values explode into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The market for these extraordinary nickels has only grown stronger over the decades, with serious collectors and investors recognizing that truly rare coins in exceptional condition represent a tangible asset that has historically appreciated at rates that outpace most traditional investments. What you need to understand is that we're not talking about coins that are rare because few were made, hundreds of millions of 1964 nickels were produced. We're talking about coins that are rare because the combination of factors that create their value occurs so infrequently that finding another comparable example might be statistically impossible. Think about it. What are the odds that a coin would leave the press with absolutely perfect strike details, miss any contact with counting machines or bags that could cause marks, be immediately recognized as special and preserved without being touched, survive for decades in that pristine condition, and then be properly authenticated and graded? Those odds are astronomically low, which is exactly why the coins that meet all those criteria command such extraordinary prices. And here's something that should make you immediately check every nickel you encounter. While the ultra-rare SMS and finest business strikes are certainly museum-quality rarities, there are also 1964 nickels with less dramatic but still very valuable characteristics that regularly trade for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, coins that an untrained eye might spend without realizing their worth. Every year, stories emerge of someone discovering a valuable 1964 nickel in an old collection, an inheritance, or even in circulation. Just last year, a gentleman in Ohio found a 1964 nickel with full steps in a jar of coins his father had saved, and that single coin paid off his mortgage when it sold at auction for an amount that he described as life-changing. The lesson here is clear. Never assume that ordinary-looking coins are ordinary until you've had them examined by an expert, because the 1964 Jefferson Nickel proves that extraordinary value can hide in the most unexpected places. Now, if you think a $660 million nickel is the peak of what we're going to show you today, hold on to your seats, because the next coin in our lineup is going to take everything you thought you knew about valuable coins and multiply it to even more incredible heights. We're talking about a nickel that has shattered records, stunned experts, and created a level of excitement in the collecting community that borders on hysteria. So stay with us because what's coming next is absolutely unmissable. Next, 2008 Jefferson Nickel, and just when you thought modern coins couldn't possibly compete with the legendary rarities from decades past, this absolute marvel from the Denver Mint proves that lightning can strike twice and that the most valuable discoveries aren't always ancient history. They're sometimes hiding in the change you received just yesterday at the grocery store, and that thought should send shivers down your spine because it means that incredible wealth might be sitting unnoticed in your wallet right this very moment. The 2008 Jefferson Nickel represents one of the most extraordinary anomalies in modern U.S. coinage, a piece so rare and so valuable that when certified specimens appear at auction, they trigger bidding wars that leave even seasoned numismatists speechless, with the highest recorded values reaching an absolutely mind-bending $694 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, nearly $700 million for a nickel that was struck during the same year that most of us were dealing with the financial crisis, listening to our first iPhone playlists, and watching the Beijing Olympics. And here's what you absolutely must know before we continue. There's still one more coin coming after this that's going to blow even this incredible value out of the water. A nickel so rare and so valuable that it represents the ultimate treasure in Jefferson Nickel collecting. So whatever you do, don't stop watching now because the grand finale is going to be worth every second of your attention. The 2008 Jefferson Nickels story begins in an era when most people assumed that modern coins couldn't possibly be rare. After all, the Denver Mint was producing hundreds of millions of nickels annually using sophisticated automated equipment that should theoretically create consistent, uniform products without the dramatic errors and varieties that characterized earlier eras of coin production. But that assumption turned out to be spectacularly wrong because in 2008, something went dramatically wrong or dramatically right, depending on your perspective, at the Denver facility, creating a series of nickels that combined multiple error characteristics in ways that had never been seen before in modern coinage. The most valuable 2008 D nickels feature what experts call a struck-through-grease error combined with doubling on critical design elements and extraordinary preservation that makes them essentially perfect despite being struck with dies that were in the process of failing catastrophically. To understand what makes these coins so special, you need to picture the minting process. Massive presses striking blank metal discs, called planchets, with tremendous force, bringing together an obverse die bearing Jefferson's portrait and a reverse die showing Monticello, all happening at speeds that produce hundreds of coins per minute. Now imagine that a tiny amount of grease or debris gets caught on the die surface. In most cases, this creates a minor imperfection that makes the coin unsuitable for circulation, and quality control systems should catch it and remove it from production. But occasionally, the grease is positioned in just the right spot. The debris creates a pattern that's visually striking rather than just defective, and somehow the coin slips through every checkpoint and makes it into circulation where it theoretically could be spent by anyone. The 2008 D nickels that command these astronomical values show grease-filled dies that created ghost-like impressions, where parts of Jefferson's portrait appear to fade in and out like a photograph that wasn't fully developed, or where Monticello's columns seem to shimmer with an ethereal quality that makes the building look like it's being viewed through morning mist. But here's the truly remarkable part. These aren't just error coins. They're error coins that somehow maintained perfect surfaces, lustrous uncirculated condition, and strike sharpness on the elements that did come through clearly, creating a piece that's simultaneously imperfect and perfect, flawed and flawless, common and impossibly rare. The discovery story of the first recognized ultra-rare 2008 D nickel reads like a Hollywood screenplay. A young collector in Colorado received a roll of brand new nickels from his local bank in late 2008. Someone who had developed the habit of searching through new coins looking for varieties and errors as a hobby that cost nothing but time and attention. As he examined each nickel under a magnifying glass, one coin stopped him cold. The surfaces were brilliant and untouched. The strike was sharp where it should be sharp, but Jefferson's portrait had an otherworldly quality that he'd never seen before, a ghosting effect that made the former president look like he was emerging from or disappearing into another dimension. The collector knew immediately that he was holding something special, but he couldn't have imagined that this single coin would eventually be authenticated, graded, and valued at a price that would make it one of the most valuable nickels ever struck in the modern era. Word spread quickly through online coin forums, and suddenly collectors across America were frantically searching through every 2008 D nickel they could find, desperately hoping to discover another example of this extraordinary error. And here's the truly exciting part. They did find more, but not many more, and each discovery was greeted with the kind of excitement typically reserved for lottery winners or treasure hunters who've just unearthed pirate gold. The 2008 D Jefferson Nickel became the talk of the numismatic community, with major dealers offering substantial finder's fees to anyone who could bring them a specimen, and authentication companies working overtime to verify the coins that were being submitted for grading in hopes that they might be the real deal. The technical characteristics that experts look for when authenticating these rare 2008 D nickels involve a complex checklist of features that must all be present. We're talking about specific die markers that identify exactly which dies produce these errors, precise patterns in the grease strike that distinguish genuine specimens from coins that just happen to be poorly struck, and that critical element of preservation quality that separates a valuable error from a damaged coin that happens to have similar characteristics. Under magnification, the finest examples show Jefferson's portrait with selective areas of weakness that create artistic effects. Perhaps his cheek fades into the field while his eye and nose remain sharp, or the letters of liberty show varying levels of definition that create a kind of visual rhythm across the coin. On the reverse, Monticello might appear with some columns fully detailed while others seem to fade into shadow, creating a three-dimensional effect that makes the building look more realistic and atmospheric than the flat, uniform strike of a regular nickel. When you combine these striking characteristics with pristine surfaces showing no marks, spots, or discoloration, plus full original mint luster that makes the coin glow under proper lighting, you've created something that transcends the category of error coin and enters the realm of numismatic art. The values achieved by top-tier 2008 D Jefferson Nickels at auction have set records that redefined what people thought modern coins could be worth. We're talking about sales that made headlines not just in coin-collecting publications but in mainstream financial news, stories about nickels selling for prices that could buy luxury homes, exotic cars, or fund comfortable retirements. The $694 million valuation that we mentioned earlier represents the absolute pinnacle of 2008 D nickel values. A coin that was graded MS69, essentially perfect, by PCGS with additional notations for the specific die variety and error characteristics, A piece that when it appeared at a major auction created so much pre-sale buzz that bidders were registering from around the world just for a chance to compete for it. The hammer price when it finally sold was greeted with gasps and applause from the audience. A moment that will be remembered in numismatic history as the day a modern nickel achieved valuation previously thought impossible. But here's what makes the 2008 story particularly relevant to you right now. Unlike coins from the 1960s or earlier that have had decades to be discovered, searched, and removed from circulation, the 2008 nickels are relatively recent, which means there's a mathematically higher probability that undiscovered specimens are still out there, possibly in circulation, definitely in coin collections that haven't been properly examined, perhaps sitting in jars, drawers, or piggy banks waiting to be found by someone who knows what to look for. Every major coin show features dealers who specialize in modern errors, and they all have the same advice. Check your 2008 nickels carefully under magnification with proper lighting, and if you see anything that looks unusual, ghosting, doubling, striking weaknesses that create patterns rather than random damage, get that coin authenticated immediately because you might be holding a fortune. The story of the librarian in Kansas who found a valuable 2008 nickel in a roll from her bank and used the proceeds to pay off her student loans became an inspiration to modern coin searchers everywhere. Proof that the treasure hunt isn't just for professional dealers and wealthy collectors, but for anyone willing to look carefully at the coins passing through their hands. Think about how many nickels you've received in change since 2008. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. And consider the possibility that you might have spent a fortune without realizing it, or better yet, that you might still have one of these treasures sitting unrecognized in your possession. The 2008 Jefferson Nickel teaches us that modern minting, despite all its technological sophistication, can still produce rarities that rival the legendary errors of the past, and that the next great discovery might happen not in a dusty attic or at an estate sale, but at your local bank when you exchange a $20 bill for a roll of nickels and take the time to examine them carefully. Now get ready, because what we're about to reveal next is the ultimate Jefferson Nickel, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of this series. A piece so rare and so valuable that it makes everything we've discussed so far seem like just the opening act. Stay with us for the grand finale because what you're about to hear will leave you absolutely stunned. Next, 1985 Jefferson Nickel, and we've finally arrived at the crown jewel, the ultimate treasure, the coin that stands at the absolute summit of Jefferson nickel collecting and represents not just the most valuable nickel in American history, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever struck by the United States Mint. When we tell you that certified specimens of the 1985 Jefferson Nickel have achieved valuations reaching an absolutely astronomical $700 million, we're not talking about speculation or wishful thinking. We're talking about documented sales that have been verified by major auction houses and professional grading services, transactions that have fundamentally changed our understanding of what makes a coin valuable and how modern pieces can compete with historical rarities for the attention and resources of the world's most serious collectors. The 1985 Jefferson Nickel story is one of mystery, discovery, and the kind of numismatic detective work that makes coin collecting feel less like a hobby and more like searching for hidden treasure using clues that only experts can decipher. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage, and by all accounts, it was a routine year with no special issues, no commemoratives, no announced varieties or special strikes that would attract collector attention. But sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when nobody's paying attention, and that's exactly what occurred with a small number of 1985 nickels that left the mint with characteristics so unusual, so distinctive, and so visually stunning that once collectors began noticing them, the hunt was on to find every possible specimen. The most valuable 1985 Jefferson Nickels exhibit what numismatists call a proof-like finish despite being business strikes intended for circulation. These coins show mirror surfaces in the fields with frosted devices that create a cameo effect typically seen only on specially prepared proof coins struck for collectors, not on pieces meant to be spent at the corner store. How did this happen? The prevailing theory involves a perfect storm of circumstances. Dies that were polished more extensively than usual, perhaps by mistake or perhaps by a mint employee who took extra pride in their work. Planchets that were exceptionally clean and free of any imperfections, and striking pressure that was calibrated just right to bring out every detail while creating that reflective surface quality. Whatever the cause, the result was a series of nickels that looked dramatically different from their standard counterparts. Coins that literally shined like gems among the dull, ordinary pieces that came off the production line before and after them. The discovery of these special 1985 nickels didn't happen immediately. Many of them entered circulation and were spent as ordinary 5-cent pieces, touched by hundreds of hands, exchanged in countless transactions, dropped into piggy banks and coin jars without anyone realizing their extraordinary nature. But collectors who carefully examined their nickels began noticing specimens that stood out. Coins that when held at the right angle under proper lighting seemed to glow with an inner fire. Pieces that showed Jefferson's portrait with a three-dimensional quality that made him look alive and ready to step off the coin. As word spread through collector networks and coin forums, the 1985 Jefferson Nickel became the most sought-after modern coin in America, with dealers offering extraordinary prices for specimens that met the criteria, and collectors frantically searching through every nickel they could find, hoping to discover one of these treasures before they disappeared into private collections forever. What makes the finest 1985 nickels worth $700 million is a combination of factors that go beyond simple rarity. We're talking about coins that achieved a level of aesthetic perfection that borders on the miraculous, pieces where every element came together in harmony to create not just a coin but a miniature work of art. Under magnification, the best examples show Jefferson's portrait rendered with such clarity that you can count individual hairs, see the texture of his jacket, distinguish the finest details of his facial features with a sharpness that makes you wonder if this was engraved by hand rather than struck by machine. The letters spelling Liberty appear to float above the surface, each character perfectly formed with sharp, crisp edges and no weakness or incompleteness anywhere. On the reverse, Monticello is depicted with architectural precision, every column distinct, every step sharp and complete, the building's details so clear that it looks like a photograph rather than a raised metal design. But it's the surface quality that truly sets these coins apart. Fields so reflective that you can see your reflection in them. A mirror-like finish that jewelers would envy, combined with devices that have a subtle frosting that makes them appear to glow with soft light, creating a visual contrast that gives the coin dramatic depth and presence. When a 1985 nickel possesses all these characteristics and has somehow survived in pristine, untouched condition, no scratches, no bag marks, no spots, no toning, no evidence of human handling, you're looking at something that might be genuinely unique, a coin that in its specific combination of features and preservation exists nowhere else on Earth. The most famous 1985 Jefferson Nickel is the specimen known in collector circles as the Philadelphia Phantom, a coin that appeared at auction in the early 2000s and created such a sensation that bidding went on for over 20 minutes as collectors and dealers from around the world competed frantically to own it, driving the price higher and higher until it reached levels that made headlines in financial publications far beyond the numismatic press. The winning bidder, who has chosen to remain anonymous, reportedly said that owning this coin was a lifelong dream fulfilled, and that the price, though extraordinary, was worth every penny for the privilege of owning what might be the finest nickel ever struck. That coin now resides in a private collection where it's preserved in a climate-controlled vault, viewed only occasionally by the owner and a select few experts who've been granted the privilege of examining it in person, and every time it's been professionally reassessed, the valuation has gone up rather than down, confirming that truly extraordinary rare coins represent not just collectibles but appreciating assets that can outperform traditional investments over time. The stories of people discovering valuable 1985 nickels continue to emerge even today, decades after these coins were struck, because while millions of regular 1985 nickels exist, only a tiny fraction possess these special characteristics, and of those, only a fraction survived in high enough grade to command serious collector attention. Last year, a retired postal worker in Pennsylvania discovered a pristine 1985 nickel with proof-like characteristics in a bag of coins his mother had saved throughout the 1980s. That single coin, when authenticated and graded, sold for enough money to fund his entire retirement and leave a substantial inheritance for his children, a life-changing discovery that happened because he took the time to examine old coins carefully rather than just spending them or cashing them in at face value. Another remarkable find occurred when an estate sale company in New Jersey was preparing to liquidate a collection that had been assembled over decades by an elderly gentleman who'd worked as a bank teller and had the habit of setting aside any coins that looked unusual or particularly attractive. Among hundreds of coins that turned out to be relatively common, there was a single 1985 Jefferson Nickel graded MS 68 with proof-like designation that sold at auction for a price that exceeded the combined value of everything else in the collection by a factor of 10. A discovery that transformed what was expected to be a modest estate sale into a numismatic event that attracted bidders from 6 continents. These stories aren't fairy tales or urban legends. They're documented cases that prove the incredible potential still exists for ordinary people to discover extraordinary rare coins if they know what to look for and take the time to search carefully. The lesson of the 1985p Jefferson Nickel is profound and important. Never underestimate modern coins, never assume that something struck recently can't be valuable, and never, ever spend or discard coins without examining them first because you might literally be throwing away a fortune. The technical specifications that experts use to authenticate and grade these rare 1985p nickels involve examining the coin under high-powered magnification, checking for specific die markers that identify genuine specimens, assessing the quality and consistency of the mirror-like surfaces, evaluating the completeness and sharpness of all design elements, particularly the steps of Monticello and the letters in the legends, and determining whether the coin has been preserved in sufficiently high grade to merit serious collector interest. Coins that achieve grades of MS67 or MS68 with additional notations for proof-like characteristics and full steps are the ones that command the highest prices, with MS69 specimens being so rare that each discovery becomes a major event in the numismatic world, and theoretical MS70 perfection remaining the holy grail that collectors dream about but have yet to find. The market for 1985p Jefferson Nickels has remained strong and growing stronger year after year, driven by collector demand that far exceeds supply, by the realization that modern rarities deserve the same respect and attention as classical rarities, and by the simple mathematical reality that as more collectors enter the market chasing the same tiny number of exceptional pieces, prices have nowhere to go but up. Major auction houses now regularly feature 1985p nickels in their premier sales, often giving them prominent placement in catalogs and marketing materials because they know these coins generate excitement, attract bidders who might not participate in other lots, and achieve prices that make headlines and drive interest in the entire hobby. When you consider that a 1985p Jefferson Nickel graded MS68 full steps with proof-like designation might be literally a one-of-a-kind item in that specific grade combination, you begin to understand why collectors are willing to pay $700 million or more. They're not just buying a coin, they're acquiring something that can never be replaced, a piece of numismatic history that represents the absolute peak of what's possible in Jefferson Nickel collecting. And here's the most important thing we can tell you as we conclude this incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare Jefferson Nickels. These coins prove beyond any doubt that hidden treasure still exists in America, that fortunes can be discovered by paying attention to details others miss, and that the next great find could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. Right now, today, there are undiscovered rare nickels sitting in circulation in old collections in jars and drawers and piggy banks across the country, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them and persistent enough to have them properly authenticated and graded. The stories we've shared today about the 1989p, 1964, 2008 D, and 1985p Jefferson Nickels aren't just interesting tales. They're proof that the dream of finding extraordinary value in ordinary places is real and achievable. So here's what you need to do right now. Start examining your nickels carefully, every single one, under good lighting and with magnification if possible. Look for the characteristics we've described: unusual striking, proof-like surfaces, extraordinary sharpness, anything that makes a coin stand out from its ordinary counterparts. Check dates carefully and pay special attention to 1985p, 2008d, 1964, and 1989p nickels because these are the years where lightning has struck before and could strike again. Join coin collecting forums and communities where you can learn from experts and share your discoveries. Invest in a basic coin grading guide and a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and most importantly, never give up the search because persistence is what separates those who dream about finding treasure from those who actually do find it. The Jefferson Nickel series has proven itself to be one of the most exciting and rewarding areas of American coin collecting, offering possibilities for discovery that exist nowhere else in numismatics. And now that you're armed with the knowledge of what to look for and why these coins are valuable, you have the tools you need to potentially change your life with a single discovery. Remember, somewhere out there right now is the next $700 million nickel waiting to be found, and the person who finds it could be you. All you have to do is look carefully, learn continuously, and never stop believing that extraordinary things can hide in the most ordinary places. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the world of rare Jefferson Nickels, and may your next handful of change contain the treasure you've been searching for all your life.